true meaning of life is. And I would like you to try to finish that. What is the true meaning of life? Can you think of a few words that would explain the true meaning of life? If there would be a title to this talk, it is The True Meaning of Life Is. Can you think? The true meaning of life is, yes. The quote from Nelson Henderson that really impressed me goes this way: the true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. I ask you, is that spiritual or is that secular? Once again, the true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. Spiritual, secular, or both? From my viewpoint, and I find this in some places that are written by people far smarter than me, there should be one set of principles that guides our actions in our secular business world and in our religious world. It's all one world. It really should be. If we have different principles here and different principles there, we're hypocrites and we're following the devil. Pardon the bluntness, but that's very true. There's one set of principles 7 days a week. I like what I've been told is a mispronunciation or a modification of the name of this Seventh-day Adventist church. In the South Pacific, sometimes they call them the 7 days. Yes, we should be Seventh-day Adventists every single day of the week. So I have a question for you. Who in the last few hundred years was a pretty good example of this? The true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. Can you think of some soul that was a good example of that concept of the true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit? Anybody think of someone? Now this one you can actually raise your hands for. How many of you heard of John Chapman? Yeah. His more common name is Johnny Appleseed. And so I found a few things and I learned a few things, and so I will just read this. Johnny Appleseed was an American pioneer nurseryman who introduced trees grown with apple seeds as opposed to trees grown by grafting in large parts of Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and the Canadian province of Ontario, as well as the northern countries of the West Virginia. He became an American icon while still alive due to his kind, generous ways, his leadership in conversation, and the symbolic importance that he attributed to apples. Now that guy had to go a long ways. He didn't have cars back then. He lived from 1774 to about 1845. That means he walked a long ways to go through Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, part of Ontario, and West Virginia. The popular image of Johnny Appleseed is spreading apple seeds just randomly wherever he walked. But the truth is something different. In fact, he planted nurseries rather than orchards. He built fences around them to protect them from the livestock and from wildlife. He left the nurseries in the care of some neighbor who sold the trees on shares. And he returned every year or two to tend to the nursery. He planted his first nursery on the bank of Broken Straw Creek, south of Warren, Pennsylvania. Next, he seems to have gone to some county that's difficult to pronounce, along French Creek. But many of these nurseries were in the Mohican River in north central Ohio. This area included towns of Mansfield, Libsyn, Lucas, Perryville, and Londonville. His personal appearance was singular in character. He was small, chunk man, quick, restless in his motions and conversations. He heard though not long. His beard, though not long, was unshaven, and his hair was long and dark, his eye black and sparkling. He lived a rough life. He often slept in the woods. His clothing was mostly old, being generally given to him in exchange for apple trees. He went barefooted and traveled miles through the snow in that way. He wore on his head a tin utensil that answered both as a cap and a mush pot. Historian Aaron wrote this: Chapman was an unusually successful businessman. He bought many parcels of land on which he planted his seeds and ultimately accumulated about 1,200 acres in these 3 states. He wore pauper's clothing by choice, but not out of necessity. And that clothing that he had was often given to him in exchange for trees. Did he see the results of what he did? I think perhaps somewhat. But as a quote that I started out with, the true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. Jesus, his disciples, and others could see the results of the miracles frequently. But this comment is, you may not even see the results of the things that you have done. But it's critically important, as you mentioned, to do service even if nobody seems to benefit from it. There is another little story. I don't really care whether it's true or whether it's fictional. It's another illustration of that concept that the true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. This is about the acorn planter. How many of you heard that story? Any soul? The acorn planter. Hopefully you'll love the story when I get done. In the 1930s, a young traveler was exploring the French Alps. He came upon a vast stretch of barren land. It was desolate, forbidding. It was ugly, the kind of place you would hurry away from. But then, as he looked more carefully, he saw in the distance, in the middle of this vast wasteland, was a bent-over man. On his back was a sack of acorns. In his hand was a 4-foot length of iron pipe. The man was using the pipe to punch holes in the ground and then take from his sack that he was carrying. He would grab an acorn and put it into the hole. Later, the old man talked with the traveler and told him, I planted over 100,000 acorns. Perhaps only 1/10 of them will grow. The old man's wife and son had died, and this is how he chose to spend his last final years. I want to do something useful, he said. 25 or 30 years later, this now not so young traveler returned to the same desolate area. What he saw amazed him. He could not believe his own eyes. The land was covered with beautiful forest, 2 miles wide and 5 miles long. Birds were singing, animals were playing, wildflowers perfumed the air. The traveler stood there recalling with the desolation that was once. Now it was a beautiful oak forest, all because someone planted trees. There's another quote that maybe some of you may have known or heard when you're growing up, and that is to leave a campsite better than found. How many of you saw that train for that to live with that idea? And the concept was when you camp, whether it was out in the wilderness or whether it was a Forest Service campground or something else, you left the campsite better than you found it. That means you covered the fire pit if there was one. That means you left the wood if just eons ago, maybe some of the younger people don't know, but you used to be able to go in there in the wood and the trees. They chopped down trees here and there that were dead. They dumped them in there. You had the Let everyone sweep in front of his own door in the whole world. Maybe a touch of exaggeration, but it's very important truth. If everybody would take care of a little bit, the whole world would be clean. It would be wonderful. If everybody lived by the golden rule and treated people nice, they would almost be heaven on earth. But too often there are some people that think everybody needs to serve them and they don't need to help anybody else. An example, it is very nice to have the sidewalk snow to walk and if I would follow this way of thinking, I should and have somebody have the sidewalk around the perimeter of the place. We do it sometimes, I'm sorry, we don't get it done. I'm not perfect. But these little things can make a huge difference. And it's not just for me as speaker. You might want to enjoy this. The second testimony about sweet faithfulness in little things. This is counsel to young men. Your case is similar in some respects to Naaman. Y'all know Naaman, story of the guy in the Bible that had his pride offended when Elijah said, I know what the river sent from Naaman was preparing to fill the sick people with the culture of the cup and get the natty to the river back to Syria. It was much nicer. They were similar. And then finally, the way the story goes is the fish help us to and so you do not consider that in order to be perfect, to have a perfect Christian character, you must condescend to be faithful in the little. All the things you are called to do may be of small account in your eyes, yet they are duties which you will have to do just as long as you live. A neglect of these little things will make a great difference in your character. Neglect of the little things will make a great difference in your character. You, my dear boys, should educate yourselves to faithfulness in small things. You cannot please God unless you do this. You cannot gain love and affection unless you do just as you are bidden, with willingness in place. If you wish those who you live with to love you, you must show love and respect for them. Those little tiny things of helping someone, a smile. I was really impressed and really a little bit when one employee that was working with me suggested that as you walk down the sidewalk, you should say hi to the people there. I thought, yes, yes, I started trying to do that in the past, and it does sometimes you even talk a bit. One time when I was in Florida, I said hello to somebody, and the response was, hola. Well, I didn't know Spanish, but Liesl, my daughter, did. So I said, what does that mean? Oh, it's like hi. It's abbreviated thing of whatever it was. Anyway, it was interesting. It makes me feel better, and I think it makes the other people feel better when you smile or say hello. Just a little thing. Just like a little cleanup of the campsite before you leave it. Or one teacher in high school who was, well, had a reputation of being very strict. But nobody flunked out of her class because they were expected to do well, and they did. But she, if the floor was getting a little dirty, somebody dropped it, she said, all right, let's spend 30 seconds and pick up the trash on the floor. And it was nice. It was wonderful. Those little things can make a huge difference. Another one that I'd like to read, this is from pamphlet 6:6, something like that. One may reason the little things that I have taken stolen is another word, don't amount to much. But the question comes home, did the smallness of the amount lessen the sin of the act? Again, the little which one person takes may not amount to much. But when 5 people act on the same plan, 5 littles are taken, and then 10, and then 20. And pretty soon, if you're stealing from a store, they may go bankrupt. Until every day the workers may, to their own injury, appropriate many little things that have no right to touch. Many littles taken make much in the end. The greatest loss is sustained by the ones who digress, for they are violating the principles of right, learning to look upon transaction and small matters of no transgression at all. They forget the words of Christ. He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. He that is unjust in that which is least is unjust also in much. Again, the true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. As I mentioned before, sometimes you see the results of what you have done. But that quote from Nelson Henderson is more provocative, more extreme. Sometimes you may not see any result, any good from the things you've done, but we are supposed to do it anyway. As we read in the scriptures earlier, from Matthew 20:28, the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto. He didn't come as a king where everybody was supposed to do this and that and get his clothes and something else. And the one thing I was really amazed of, and forgive me if you really love the guy, but allegedly King Charles of Great Britain has an assistant put 1 inch of toothpaste on his toothbrush. Well, most people feel that that's more toothpaste than you should have. And believe you me, I don't want anybody putting toothpaste on my toothbrush. I do it myself. But that's the way some people operate. Everybody helps them. They go to the car and maybe somebody helps them get in. Somebody else drives. Somebody lays out their clothes as they're coming in undressed. Somebody picks them up and they do this and that. And it's just, I'm sorry, that's not fun. But some people think it is fun. Well, as Jesus said, the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister. And yes, he gave his life a ransom for many. Some of you may have somewhat memorized, either in detail or in concept, the story in Matthew about 12:46 to 50. I will paraphrase this and I will read some of it exactly. Matthew 12:46 to 50. He was talking to the people. His mother and his brethren came without, and somebody came and said, "Hey, your mother and your brethren are out, desiring to speak with you." But he answered and said unto them, "Who is my mother, and who are my brethren?" Then he stretched forth his hand toward his disciples, and he said, "Behold, my mother and my brethren. For whosoever shall do the will of my Father which is in heaven, the same is my mother, my sister, and my brother." The emphasis here is on doing, not professions, not blood relatives. And some of you know the story in about Matthew 25:31 to 40. When the Son of Man will come with all his glory and the holy angels meet him, then he shall sit on the throne, and the nations will be gathered. He'll separate the one from another as a shepherd divides the sheep and the goats. And he will set the sheep on his right hand and the goats on the left. And the king shall say unto them on his right hand, "Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was a hungered, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, you came unto me." Then the righteous will say, "Lord, when did we see thee hungered and feed thee, or thirsty and give we drink? Or a stranger, and we took thee in, or naked, and we clothed thee? Or we saw you sick, or in prison, and came unto you?" Then the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as you've done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me. In this particular portion of the fragment, in this story in the Bible, your salvation depends upon what you did. Now, don't throw tomatoes. Don't crucify me. But it depends upon what you did. And they didn't even know they were doing something special. That's just what you did. You left the campsite better than you found it. You cleaned off the sidewalk. You saw somebody in need, and you helped them. Why was that? Because you had been changed on the inside. You are now a brother or sister of Christ. It is not our works that save us. It's the grace of God that saves us. But we will tell people by our works whether we're saved or not. We may talk, and a lot of people do, about the right relationship with God. And some of these people emphasize the relationship so much that you don't have to clean the sidewalk. You don't have to help somebody in need. Well, they're deluded. You can tell, as in James said, by the works you can see whether you have faith or not. As I may have mentioned, I probably even did here before. Faith is like jumping out of the building into the net that the fire department has for you. Belief is, I know it's good, we should do that, but no, I'm not going to jump. Faith really has works. And if you are changed because you have a loving response to God's love to us, you will clean your sidewalk. You will help other people. Too often, people have the belief that this is secular. This is my business. I operate it like a business should be operated. These are the rules that we operate by. And then, when I'm in church or when I'm in prayer meeting, we have a little different principles. Not so. We should be Seventh-day Adventists, not Seventh-day Adventists. In a comment, a paragraph that Mrs. White wrote, every sharp transaction in deal, every bargain made to advantage yourselves to the disadvantage of another is a violation of God's law. You do not love your neighbor as yourself. You are registered, even you that handle sacred things, as transgressors of God's law. I have heard and went to church with a gentleman who was an elder in the church, seemed to be very upstanding, but at home, he was not a fit ambassador of the heavenly kingdom. And sadly, that can happen. You may be a wonderful leader in this and that. I have also heard stories, don't know if it's exactly true, but it seems to fit, that the wife of some very prominent church leader that has all sorts of riches and this and that was pretty arrogant, selfish, and obnoxious to deal with on the airplane. No, you should be polite and nice to deal with no matter where you're at. Those who are doing the work of God cannot dishonor His name more decidedly than by being sharp and dishonest in dealings. You may not call these sharp, keen transactions dishonest, but God calls them so. You can never gain respect as Christian unless you represent Christ in spirit, in temper, in deportment, in all your business transactions. In order to do good to those connected with you in the work, you must inspire them with sound confidence in your piety, the purity of your principles. If they see you as stern, iron-hearted, unfeeling, cold, unloving. They know that you are not Christians, even though you're an elder in the church. Yes, I added the last little bit. But it is so true, so true. I did read and purchase and gave to some of the staff a book called Contented Cows Get Better Milk. The plain truth about employee relations and your bottom line. And they cite stories and example after example. Now, they wrote this as a secular book. They didn't really mention God, but they quoted the Bible, but they'd attribute it to Mr. Roosevelt. That's where there's no vision, the people perish. I think you'll find that in the Bible someplace. But they showed that if you treat your employees nice, you trust them, you work with them, you guide them, and you lead by example, you make more money. It's very true. In the short time, if you're really tough and rough and this and that, you may make a little extra money. But in the long run, it doesn't work out. So God's principles are better both in the religious world and in the secular world. Some of you may or may not have flown much. Southwest Airlines used to have a great reputation. The people had fun. They did well and they were efficient. Well, some person that owns a lot of shares now is changing it. Southwest Airlines is no longer the airlines it used to be. Just because he wanted some short-term, immediate gain. God's way is you plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. You just do the right thing no matter what. You may not get the benefit now, but later on you may. And as we mentioned earlier in the study time, dear Stephen, who was stoned to death, with Paul watching and encouraging it, may be surprised, but he'll be pleased to see that Saul could be his neighbor in heaven. One other thing about one set of principles for every day of the week. Businessmen will not incorporate their business management, businessmen who will not incorporate in their business management the religion and spirit of Christ. They would separate religion to a large degree from their business. And it goes on to say that that is just not good. As we mentioned, read earlier, it's a sin. We need one set of principles to live by, both in church and in the secular business, because secular business is not really secular. No, it's just how a Christian businessman will work. The world should always be a better place because we have lived. That was adapted from Sir Alec Guinness, or had another code name that he went by. There's a poem I would like to read, and I will share with you that I strongly believe the truth is the truth, whether God speaks it or the devil speaks it. This is, I believe, very true. And right at the end, there's something that I feel is critically important that I want you to really memorize. This is a poem that was allegedly found on the wall of Mother Teresa's home for the children in Calcutta. People are often unreasonable, irrational, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. I have seen that. Somebody went out of their way to take their time and money to help somebody else. Yet other people were saying they were just trying to fleece the old widow and gain some money off of her. But you do it anyway. If you're successful, you will win some unfaithful friends and some genuine enemies. Succeed anyway. If you're honest and sincere, people may deceive you, but be honest and sincere anyway. What you spend years creating, others could destroy overnight. Create anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, some may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today will often be forgotten, but do good anyway. Give your best you have, and it will never be enough, but give your best anyway. And here's the thing I really want you to remember. In the final analysis, it's between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. And that comment really helps me understand a little bit more about the true meaning of life thing that I started with. The true meaning of life is to plant trees, aka do good deeds, be kind, take care of those little things, under whose shade you never expect to sit. You may not see the benefits. You may not get any thank yous. But the real thing is between you and God, not between you and the other people. So consider these things that I mentioned. Some of you already have them memorized, but I'd really like you to memorize and meditate on. The true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. And many of you already know and have experienced and followed after the concept in leave the campsite better than you found it. And then the next one, let everyone sweep in front of their own door and the whole world will be clean. Even if the neighbors on either side of you don't clean off the sidewalk if you happen to live in town. You can clean off your sidewalk anyway. If you feel inspired, you can clean off the sidewalk on the neighbor's place too, because the way I understand it, the sidewalks are owned by the city. Yes. And the world should definitely be a better place because we have lived. Remember the phrase in Matthew, Kings shall answer and say unto them, verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me. Outside of the Bible, I think one of the most profound and comprehensive guides to life is the true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade we do not expect to sit. You can make the world a better place because you live. The reason why I know that's true is because of things which are impossible with men are possible with God.